Hey everyone, welcome to Trust Your Teachers. I'm Tia Creighton. I'm your host today. We have the teaching duo of Noreen and Rob Solari. Rob was a science teacher, biology teacher, Rob, at
Yes.
Star. For how many years were you there?
40.
40 years. 40 years. And Noreen is a Star master teacher of the River City School District. How long were you there, Noreen?
Still there about 25 years.
Still there. She's the most wanted substitute teacher in the district these days. Very hard to get Noreen on your schedule. So let's jump into it. This is Trust Your Teachers. This is the podcast that tries to give voice to the teacher voice. And we're going to discuss a few topics today. So let's dive into COVID. I know you are both retired teachers and so weren't actively teaching at the time, but I'm curious of what your perspective is on how teaching weathered the COVID storm. Rob, you want to maybe share a little bit of perspective on that? But what do you think is the impact?
In speaking with colleagues and paying attention to the news and information about teaching, sort of two avenues. One is kids have fallen behind. I think those high achieving kids with wealth behind them and parents that aren't necessarily working 9 to 5 every single day. I think they're going to weather this fine and perhaps have no impact. Kids that have learning differences, kids that struggle, kids that perhaps English is a second language have fallen behind, and we would really need to invest resources into having them catch up. I think they'll catch up partway, just because that's going to happen because they'll be sort of spurred along. But I think there really needs to be intervention, which costs money, which means it's probably not going to happen to get them caught up.
Especially probably in the public schools for sure. Yeah. How about you, Noreen? What are you seeing?
Same along those lines. My friends, the older teachers who struggled to get, the technology of it, to get online during COVID and be able to be really successful. But same thing, the kids that had help from their parents and at home support, they said this year coming back, most of the kids were fine. They did really well. They were where they should have been. But it was those lower end kids that, that didn't have the quiet places and, the room to work on their computers or even have a computer to do online, home learning. The kids just ended up further and further behind. So the gap is just bigger. But again, they don't need a whole lot of extra help, most of those kids, to catch back up. But I don't think the school districts are giving them that.
I mean, it seems like they need concentrated help. They need like
absolutely
school or something. It seems to me. If you guys were told, like, okay, if you were teaching, you were told, okay, go home, shut your classroom, go home, 72 hours, come back online and teach, what would your reaction have been? I mean, can you imagine what you
would? A couple of things come to mind. One is, if this was 20 years ago, there would be no options.
Right.
You'd have to make packets, I suppose, and send them home and get them back in some sort of weekly manner or something like that. So it would have been a vastly different crisis, I think, with far deeper reaching consequences. Online learning is taking place in most schools already prior to the pandemic with Google Classroom and things like that. So there was a little bit of a transition happening already in a lot of schools. So I think that was fortunate.
I did see that there was a big push. I mean, right away, what was happening with the teachers that I saw is that they were sending packets home. I mean, nobody was prepared for this. And this really pushed that online. There was a little like toe dip into the water, but this really pushed it. But at first, everybody was like, making copies, sending packets home. And so in a way, it was kind of good. Now they have these tools in the classroom to use.
Yeah, because, the doing the hybrid thing, a little of both is not a bad thing. And that just brought that technology more into the classroom. But, all the teachers I saw, oh my God, they did everything they could to make it work. You know, like you said, getting packets together, copying stuff, delivering it to kids, getting it from them, you know, as well as doing the technology part of it too, you know, but
it was a major heroic effort. I was so impressed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They just like, we're determined to do it. We don't want to be here, but this is,
we don't know how to do it for sure, but we're going to try really hard. And they did.
And there were a number of teachers I spoke to who chose to retire because it was just too much for them. And those that hung in there told me they were working twice as hard as they'd ever worked before to try and do what they knew was right. The reason they became teachers, you know, to be givers, you know.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's fantastic. Speaking of putting in like high effort, the teacher hacks. I know a lot of teachers are, you know, they're short on resources. They have to do a lot of workarounds. Do you guys have a favorite or a successful or a failed teacher hack that you would want to share with the audience?
Well, a couple things. One is part of that teacher hack thing, I think, is also when things fall apart to have things to fall back on.
Right.
You know, so if you have some experiment or technology,
the soft shoe. You got to do the soft shoe.
Yeah,
exactly.
You have to have a bag of tricks that you can reach into and keep the kids going. So I always had a bunch of things that I could reach into the kids would find interesting, even though it wasn't what was planned.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Noreen, the same thing.
Yeah, that they'd learned. Yeah, always had to have something. Like Rob always said, he likened teaching to being, you know, being on stage. You know, a comedian that had that 50-minute or 70 minutes that they had to entertain and keep everybody's attention. Yeah. And you know, sometimes if it wasn't working, you had to be able to go to something else. You know, go on to the next thing.
I didn't want to cut you off, Rob. Was there something specific that you wanted to share from your bag of tricks that you?
Well, no, I was just thinking, you know, if you you know, just a tiny little snippet is you want something they're interested in, you know. So kids that live in California, I had one of my little tools in my tool chest was California is the place where the biggest thing that's ever lived in the world resides, the oldest thing in the world resides, and the biggest animal that ever lived larger than dinosaurs resides. And I'd let them sort of guess at it, and then I would build around it, and all three things had to do with biology, so it actually worked pretty good.
What is it? The gray whale? What is it?
Well, so blue whales. Yeah, blue whales off our coast.
Blue whales.
And they're larger than any dinosaur that ever lived by far.
Wow.
We have the General Sherman tree in Sequoia National Park, which is the largest living thing on Earth. And I, you know, go through the dimensions and stuff like that. And the bristlecone pines in the White Mountains of Eastern California, the Methuselah tree is over 5,000 years old.
Really? I've never seen a bristlecone pine. I'll have to go.
Beautiful. We went
now I just learned something. What a teacher you are.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, to think our little state has that thing, and the kids, you know,
like that.
They're firing things out, and they get some right, some wrong, and they get involved. And although it was a misfire because I had to go into that, it turns out to be a hit. You know,
it's all right. It's good, and then you build state pride.
Exactly.
Well. Right.
They're pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
True.
And maybe something to talk about at the dinner table.
Yeah, really.
There you go. Yeah, because they can take that home and ask their parents and have that conversation.
Yeah.
It's a small enough information they can remember that.
Yeah, I remember it. I have a small brain. I'll remember that part. So the other thing, another topic that I've always been interested in is that, you know, everybody has an opinion about teachers, teaching, education. What do you want people to know about teaching and teachers? The biggest misconception that you feel like you got, like if you had to say, listen to my injustice as a teacher, what would you want that message to be?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of walk a mile in my shoes is I'd like people, well, a couple things. One is you'd have people at like back to school night, parents say, you know, when I'm done with my job, I think I'd like to try teaching. You know,
anybody can do it.
And I think, and one of my colleagues would say, what is it you do? Oh, I'm a surgeon. And she would say, well, you know, when I'm done teaching, I thought I'd become a surgeon.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like anybody can teach.
Yeah.
No, I used to do a presentation to new teachers where I juggle balls, and I said, a good juggler tries to keep as many balls in the air as they can, right? But when you first start out, that's very difficult to do, and it's much like teaching. A teacher has to be really knowledge competent in their subject matter, one ball. They have to be really good at classroom management, because if kids don't listen, no learning takes place, a second ball. You know, so I would go through all the things a teacher had to do to be a successful.
And the comedy and the humor. I mean, the humor seems important. Right?
Yeah, there's so many things, and people don't realize there's a multitasking job that is really quite difficult and absolutely exhausting.
Yeah.
You know, I think people, and you know,
you get the summers off.
Oh, that's what people think.
Yeah.
Hey, you get, what do you mean? You get all summer off, you get 2 weeks at Christmas, you get a week at Easter. I mean, what are they complaining about?
I always saw myself as a marathon runner that was running out of gas and starting to fall towards the pavement. And the last day of school hit, I hit the pavement. And it took me 2 or 3 months to recover to be standing upright to start the next year again.
And then somebody handed you a thimble of Gatorade at the end. You're like, oh. How about you? It seems like you kind of had a little bit of sense there, Noreen, of something.
Yeah, the teachers just, nobody quite appreciates how hard they work. And I'll, you know, and I think about, you know, people in an office and they complain about, you know, they're working with a group of 10 people and they can't get along and there's different personalities. And I think a teacher's working with 25 to 30 students, their parents, the administration, the other teachers that want stuff from them. You know, it's like the amount of just moving parts and personalities and problems that come into a classroom every day. You know, when I walk in, I just think, oh my God, it's like things just can turn to shit in 2 seconds, you know? And
yes.
like it starts out and all of a sudden you turn around and one thing has just led to this whole undoing of everything. You know, I mean, it just seems to me that most teachers are dealing with that stuff just day in and day out, and conflicts and, you know, just one thing or another. It's just amazing. They've just got to be really competent,
right? And meanwhile, you're trying to keep that through line of
you know, keep focused that you know, you're trying to still get some kind of learning going on each day.
And in high school, Rob, you're dealing, what do you have, 120 students? I mean, you're
so you know, and you
juggling.
really, and to do your job right, you really have to do your very best to learn about each of them as individuals, because each of them has to be dealt with differently to be successful what they're trying to get across. And I should say, you know, what I said about the difficulties that teachers face and all the different facets and balls they have to keep in the air. I found that most parents understood that and appreciated it. It was a minority that really, you know, kind of thought it was, you know, an easy job and stuff like that. So.
But they're a vocal minority, and they do.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. That's great. I appreciate those comments. Looking a little bit, we talked a bit about COVID and technology in the classroom. And I think this idea of the paperless classroom has been around for a long time. It's been around in business too, the paperless office, right? So we're all going to just be online all the time. Do you see that the K through 12 classrooms ever becoming paperless? Do you see, you know, just being completely seamless, you know, no paper, no.
I don't know about completely, but
moving towards that.
Yeah, moving towards that. I would have assignments that I would give online. They'd submit it to my Google account, and they'd be graded that way, and their grades would be reported electronically. So there is a lot of that, but also at least in science, you know, you're doing hands-on experimentation where data has to be recorded at the time, and that certainly can be recorded online, but perhaps there's, you know, drawings and things like that, and you can also take photographs. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's possible, but there is something to be said about, you know, scribing.
Handwriting.
Yeah,
like and little kids. I mean, you know, being able to actually sit down and write, you know, that's a skill they have to learn and develop.
It seems like it's going away. I mean, honestly, I feel like maybe the handwriting piece of it may go away. We may not be doing that as humans.
I mean, you're seeing that now in class where you are, that it's less and less, huh?
And again, this research is 5 years old for me. But every indication of the research I read up until 5 years ago was that
did you read it in the book or did you read it online?
Both. But writing notes and that whole process, working with the brain with scribing, is substantially better than keyboarding as far as memory goes and keeping information long term.
I agree with that.
So,
I wish we would not lose that, but we may.
yeah.
Do you guys remember the first kind of breakthrough innovation in the classroom, tech innovation that came into your classroom, even if it was just like the Ditto machine or whatever,
Well, I started off
a long time.
Yeah, I started off with a mimeograph Ditto machine.
Yeah.
With a Spirit Master that made a mistake. It was a big hassle to clean up, and then you get a Xerox machine where you actually make copies. Showed 16 millimeter films for any video we wanted to watch, which switched to Betamax, which switched to VHS, and then ultimately led to smart boards and projectors and computers microscopes hooked up to the computers so you could project them for the whole class, and and fairly advanced innovations.
Yeah, technology.
Right. I mean, it's amazing in that history, that we.
And it seemed over a fairly short period of time too. You went 40 years. You went from the Xerox machine to having everything on screens all over the classroom.
To no such thing as a personal computer. Or a computer period, till maybe 2 years in, where Radio Shack came out with T something 80s or whatever. They used cassette recorders, and you could program a little bit, which led to IBMs that were impossible to use, which finally led to an Apple IIe that became something that was somewhat useful in education to what we have now.
Yeah.
So a lot of transition.
Yeah, we need to honor that. Everybody's like, oh, it's not to be, but like us older people, we don't know anything about it. It's like, well, we've gone through a real evolution here, people.
Yeah.
We've really had to learn a lot.
When you think about it.
So
yeah,
you young whippersnappers out there.
Little do they know, huh?
Anything else you guys want to share that you think our audience might like to hear about teachers teaching, the world of teaching, tech, messages you want to get out? I really appreciate hearing from you.
I mean,
you guys have been in the trenches.
Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, when anybody asked him what he did and what his profession was, he would always say, I'm proud.
Hello? I don't know.
He said, I'm proud to say I'm a teacher, which is what he originated as.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. I can't think of anything that I would have rather have done, or really I'm kind of more prouder of being, than to say that I was a teacher.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think it's a noble profession.
Absolutely.
That does have an impact, and people should be privileged to be a teacher.
Yeah.
It's a privilege and sort of covenant you sign with your students and colleagues.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it as a parent, once you have your own kids, that, these teachers are the people that you're putting in charge of your children for more hours in a day than a lot of parents are with their kids, and God, you got to respect them. Some of the nicest people, the finest people I know, hardest working people I know are teachers.
And it's really rewarding. I know you guys have talked to me about it before, about it, when students will see you later in their lives, they're grown up, they recognize you, recognize them, all the people that you remember, of all of the children and who've come along, thousands and thousands, and you guys still remember many of them when you see them later in life. I know my dad's he does the same thing. It's amazing how many people whose lives you impact, and they remember it and they thank you for it. It's very rewarding.
I mean, Rob has had so many kids or people he's run into, grown-ups, that have said that I went into medicine, I went into research, I went into this because of your biology class, because it got me so interested in science. And you think, you did your job. So it's pretty cool. It is. I mean, you don't realize how much effect you can have on kids. Well, you said that before. You say things, and you hear years later, you said this to me.
You're like, oh,
my life. And
I'll have to remember that again.
I remember that.
Well, and on the reverse side of the coin, you hope you didn't say too much that did the opposite, unknowingly.
Yeah.
I think that's always in the back of the mind, right?
Yeah.
That's another important thing. You realize, my words mean something with these children. I have to pick my words carefully.
Yeah. I mean, it is something to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks you guys. I appreciate it. This is a great episode of Trust Your Teachers. Signing off here. Don't hang up. I'm just going to stop our recording for just a second, and then we'll chat a bit on the
Okay,
air.
thank you.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Okay.